dedicated to one of the most important and interesting in the same time countries in NATO, a great military and economic power, and why not great tourist attraction. We're talking about Turkey, which this is the subject, and the theme is prospects for Turkey's foreign and security policy in the current security context, very long title. Debate organized in partnership with the Foundation for Political, Economic and Social Research from Turkey. Why is so important, especially now, a debate on Turkey? Because Turkey is a regional power and Ankara plays a particular role on the Black Sea region, but on the Mediterranean Sea also. The cruel and unfair war started by Russia against Ukraine increased also the role of Turkey in the current security context, and the elections for president in Turkey raise serious questions and, in the same time, expectations. Till now, Ankara condemned the military aggression of Russia against Ukraine, but on the other side, Turkey didn't sustain the international sanction against Russia. More, Turkey sustained military Ukraine, but continued to deliver weapons to Kiev, and Turkish company Baykar, I think, announced they will build a drones factory in Ukraine. On the other hand, Russia is the greatest gas provider for Turkey, and more, Russia will make a great nuclear power plant at Mersin in Turkey. I have also to remind that Ankara didn't close the airspace from the Russian planes. This is how, in a single day, around 120 flights from Russia are registered in Istanbul airport. In the context, as I said, there are a lot of questions about the future of Turkey and main about the foreign and security policy. Well, in this context, I'm very honored to introduce the three distinguished speakers on the Turkish space, member of this panel, who accepted the invitation of New Strategic Center. So I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Yücel Acer, sir. Is a professor in international law and currently the head of the Department of Public Law and the Faculty Law Ankara Yildirim Beyazid University, and he is also a senior researcher of CETA Foundation and the National Center for Sea and Marine Law. Mr. Elshel.
Okay. Thank you.
I know you are also the author of some important works since Aegean Maritime Disputes and International Law and the Crime of Aggression International Law. Some very significant titles in this context. Would you start the discussion?
Thank you, Dan. As you say, I have been dealing with some significant issues concerning basically Turkey from the perspective of international law. That's why my speech today is going to be a bit legal-centered rather than politics. But of course, there is no way to separate the international politics from international law. So I will try to mix it if I can. Let's see how I would be successful. First of all, I would like to start with some arguments against Turkey's policies against Russia, especially since the start of Russia's aggression on Ukraine. Turkey has been criticized on certain points. I have identified two basic criticisms directed against Turkey since the start of the Russia's aggression. The first one is that, according to this assessment, Turkey does not comply with the requirements of being a NATO member as an ally. A couple of examples are given to prove that Turkey is not really complying with the requirements of NATO membership. The first one is, Turkey does not apply any sanctions against Russia, or Turkey does not participate in sanctions applied by the Western countries and by many other countries against Russia. Another example is that Turkey still continues to trade with Russia. As Dan said, if you just look at the number of flights, from Russia, and many other areas, still trade is continuing. And this is given as an example that Turkey is not complying with the requirements of being a NATO member. And also, before the Russia's aggression on Ukraine in February of last year, Turkey was criticized for purchasing S-400 from Russia. It was the major issue before the Russian aggression. It was so significant for especially USA that United States actually started to apply sanctions against Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, but still, let's remember it, United States was applying sanctions against Turkey. I think this is the first criticism, that Turkey is not really acting as a member of NATO. Another criticism is that Turkey is an expansionist and aggressive country, as well as a country disrespectful of international law. That's another criticism. I think there are many official statements from some countries officially naming Turkey as an aggressor, or at least quite similar to Russia in terms of policies. These are the criticisms against Turkey. It's quite strong statements, actually. I'm not here as an official person, so I cannot respond to these criticisms as an official person. I'm just an academic, so I can only express my thoughts and assessments as an academic rather than an official. In order to address these allegations, I think I have to start with the Russia's aggression in Georgia in 2008 to understand what's really happening concerning the Turkey-Russia relations after the Ukrainian invasion. I think in 2004, there was an open statement by President George W. Bush concerning the possible membership of Georgia and Ukraine, a possible membership of NATO in 2004. So President Putin really, acted furiously against this statement, saying that there would be no way Russia would expect possible membership of Georgia and Ukraine. Over this statement, almost an inevitable tension erupted in Georgia in 2008, when Georgia tried to take control in its own republics inside Georgia. Then Russia responded militarily in August 2008 by occupying some part of Georgia. During this crisis, we see that there have been many strong statements from the United States condemning this action as illegal. Russia's excuse was that, Russia intervened to protect the fundamental rights of people living in these parts of Georgia, but the United States was saying that the operation was not limited to that regions, so it was illegal. But the United States did not do anything further than this, just condemning Russia's aggression in Georgia. While all this happening, Turkey has been simply trying to apply the Montreux Convention because it had to apply the Montreux Convention just as every time during the Second World War, during all the war conditions, Turkey is in a position to apply Montreux Convention strictly. Simply because Turkey was applying Montreux Convention, Turkey was criticized of being not helping Georgia properly. It was not the real situation, in fact. You know, after these aggressions, Georgia was trying to increase its military capabilities starting in 2008, and Georgia started to buy weapons from certain NATO countries, and Turkey was one of them. Turkey was militarily supporting Georgia after the Russian aggression in Georgia. Then the Prime Minister of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, visited Baku and Tbilisi at that time, and offering a platform for peace and stability in Caucasia. It was a proposal by Prime Minister Erdogan, but this was refused by Russia, not only by Russia, but also by the United States. So that initiative stayed there, yielded no result. When we came to Crimea crisis in 2014, you know, the population of Crimea is about 2.5 million. 10% of this population is Tatar Turks. That's why it has a special relation with Turkey. As soon as the Russian aggression started in Crimea, Turkey again expressed that it could not be acceptable to annex Crimea to Russia. And there were many statements from the Turkish officials, including then the Foreign Minister of Turkey, Ahmet Davutoğlu, was saying that anything based on the illegal referendum would not be acceptable to Turkey. That was the official position. The relations were so tight with Russia that Turkey shut down a Russian airplane, military airplane in Syria. It was like a, you know, like a maximum of tension at that time between Russia and Turkey. In 2016, Turkey signed a military cooperation agreement with Ukraine to produce weapons together in 2016, after the invasion, after the annexation of Ukraine or occupation of Crimea by Russia. This was the Turkish official position. Not only the official position, as I said, there have been many concrete steps taken by Turkey to support Ukraine in terms of the Crimea issue. But during that time, we shouldn't forget that some European countries have been continuing to cooperate with Russia economically. Germany concluded an agreement to establish Nord Stream 2 at the same time. I think the process has already started before the Crimea issue, but still Germany continued to, you know, further improve the project. You know, Turkey had really very tight relations, very uneasy relations with Russia at that time, but I think I have to emphasize that everything was going according to legal rules on behalf of Turkey, but there was no clear support from other countries, at least the Turkish position against Russia. You know, relations being so tight, if you look at the developments after 2020, Foreign Minister of Russia was visiting Egypt and Iran at that time, and he said that if Turkey continued to support Ukraine militarily, then the result would be quite problematic for Turkey. That was the statement by Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. But Çavuşoğlu, then the Foreign Minister of Turkey, said that, you know, we had good relations with Russia and Ukraine. We always support the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and it was our official position, and there was nothing against Russia. It was just the, you know, legal rules that Turkey was following. And Montreux Convention again, and Foreign Minister said that they would continue to apply Montreux Convention without any exception. And when Russia made an aggression on Ukraine in February of last year, immediately Turkey condemned it as illegal. You remember that there was a voting in General Assembly of United Nations just after the start of the invasion. There have been 141 states voted in favor of the condemnation of Russian action. Turkey was one of them. But let me remind you that there have been 32 abstained states against that condemnation. Only 5 or 4 countries were against, but the abstained were about more than 30. So Turkey was one of the countries condemning Russian action as illegal. Another point, last point then, if I am exceeding my time limit, Turkey again have been quite careful in applying Montreux Convention. You know, didn't allow any Russian warship from outside harbors of Russia. You know, according to Montreux Convention, Turkey should not allow any warships during the wartime of warring countries to go into Black Sea, including warships of Russia if they are not bound with a harbor in Black Sea region. So I remember that Turkey refused one of the 3 warships that Russia wanted to pass through the straits after the invasion started. And the last point, you know, Turkey, as we see, quite, you know, realistically trying to, you know, follow a policy against Russia, not to intimidate Russia, to make it more aggressive in the region. So that's why Turkey has been quite careful in following a neighborly good relations with Russia and trying to keep its relations with Russia. So I think it paid some advantages to all international community and also the community of the region. Turkey is now, you know, almost the only country to talk to Russia over some significant issues like grain deal, grain corridor deal. You know, it just expired a couple of days ago, and again, President Erdogan really worked very hard to secure another 2 months extension, which is quite significant for international community. So I think I should stop here. I know there are many points to be raised, but I have to stop here. Maybe question time, we will continue. Then, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and for your, let's say, realistic... Microphone. Oh, sorry. Thank you for your presentation and for your realistic observation regarding the relationship between Turkey and NATO, and at the same time Turkey and Georgia, and wait some development regarding maybe Greece. Well, now I have the pleasure to introduce Mrs. Valeria GIANNOTTA. She's a member of the Scientific Committee of European Institute of Euro-Asian Dialogue and producer of the weekly program Turkiye Chiama Italia. Sounds like a Romanian. At the Turkish State Radio and channel TRT from Italy. Mrs. GIANNOTTA studied and worked in Turkey, and her book Erdogan e il suo partito has been listed among the best politic essays of the year 5 years ago. Very nice. You have the floor, Mrs. GIANNOTTA.
Well, thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you for the organization. I think much has been said before by the colleague, Professor Yücel. So what is certain is that political stance in the region is based on the protection of the national interest of Turkey nowadays. And this balancing diplomacy that President Erdogan nowadays is trying to pursuing is pretty much dictated by this and by the geopolitical position of the country. I always say that nobody is really jealous of Turkey because the neighborhood is very difficult and there are many challenges coming from the region and many threats as well. So Turkey, to some extent, is trying to protect its own interests because the stability of the region is also the stability of the country and vice versa. The stability of domestic politics reflects the stability of the region too. I will say that recently the Turkish policymakers, they were talking about the new axis of Turkey, trying to underline the effort of the Turkish government of establish the independent axis for the country, not strictly related to the West, as it was in the past, not strictly related to the East, but strictly related to Turkey and Turkish interest. And this Turkish interest is coming both from the fact that Turkey has been historically embedded in the international structure. As it was pointed out, Turkey is the second biggest army within NATO. Turkey is a NATO member since 1952. Turkey is a candidate member for European Union, and Turkey is playing a crucial role also within the UN system. President Erdogan has been portraying this motto that the Security Council should be reformed because a better international system, an international structure, a fairer world is possible, he says, by pointing out that the composition of the permanent member of Security Council nowadays is reflecting a distribution of power which is no longer existing. So the world is bigger than five, we used to say. But also, as I mentioned before, Turkey has several interests connected to the region, and he has to protect his own interests as well when it comes to security, protection of the borders, war on terrorism, and also economic and trade factors as well, migration, for example. I would say that nowadays, Turkey is under our eyes, the fact that Turkey has started a normalization process with many regional actors. Some of them, they've been some historical competitors of Turkey. So normalization has been accomplished in regard of Israel, has been accomplished in regard of some other neighborhood countries. Behind the scene is going to be concluded, I think, very soon with Egypt as well. With the Syrian dialogue is still going on. And the good relationship has been always repristinated after the earthquake, thanks to the so-called earthquake diplomacy with Greece too. With Armenia, again, we are recording a sort of restarting of diplomatic relations. So this is a fact that I believe is not going to change, and is also due to the fact that the key actors in the region, the great powers withdrew from the region. So there is a vacuum to fulfill. And Turkey is aimed at playing a leadership role in the region as well. Turkey is not just a hard power, based on the fact that he has the biggest army within NATO, based also on the fact that the current Turkish government is investing a lot in defense system, trying to be independent from the West and from the great powers. But also, Turkey is a very good, smart powers. Is very visible in Turkish public diplomacy, for example, in the emergency diplomacy. I mean, I'm coming from Italy, and when the pandemic occurred in 2020, we felt in despair because we did not have any equipment. But Turkey was the first country delivering medical equipment to Italy and to Spain and some other countries. Thanks to the fact that the structure of the Turkish diplomacy nowadays is also based on several agencies that they are operating abroad, like TICA, like the agency for the Turkish diaspora all around the world. So I will say that the combination of this hard power and the soft power of Turkey elevates Turkey to the state of a smart power nowadays. So it's something that it's new, but it's very effective. And also, I think Turkey is aiming and is also capable to play the role of stabilizing, as a stabilizing power in the region, like keeping the stability, trying to avoid the big changes occurred. And he has the capability to do that, and also the credibility. When I speak to credibility, I always refer to the agreement that was signed between Turkey and European Union in 2016 related to the so-called Syrian refugees, that we call them refugees, but they are not under the international law. They are like people under temporary protection. But Turkey has taken the burden to host those people and made an agreement with the European Union. And actually, the agreement proved to be effective, despite some dysfunctionalities that every now and then occurred. But nowadays, Turkey is the country hosting almost 4 million Syrians. So this is something, and it avoided further migration towards Europe. So it underlines how Turkey can be a credible partner for the European institution and European Union in these cases. Of course, there are sometimes there are some doubts arising from the West. Also, when it comes to NATO, they say, how come Turkey, one of the main countries within our alliance, makes an agreement with Russia, or is just trying to balance things and having these zigzag policies on certain affairs? I personally believe that Turkey should be, in one side, it's a free rider, because it has some interests that not necessarily are getting aligned with the interests of the national alliance, but at the end of the day, they are not so incompatible, I will say in this way. And Turkey still is playing a crucial role in keeping the threats, in fighting against the threats and the challenging coming from the east and the south of the alliance. And also, when it comes to negotiation and again soft power, I think Turkey indeed has been one of the main actors in this Russian-Ukraine war, trying to keep the channels open. Because honestly, by thinking in terms of real politics, I believe that any constructive diplomatic solution comes through the dialogue. So we should listen to both sides sometimes and keep the channels open. And it was very remarkable, the effort of Turkey in a start to bring together both Minister of Foreign Affairs in Antalya last year, and then again going on with the negotiation attempt in Istanbul. And then, thanks to the personal contact of Erdogan with Putin and Zelensky, keeping the channels open, and also the creation, as it was mentioned by my colleague, Professor Yücel, of the Grain Corridor, which has been an international acknowledged success, proved by the fact that in Istanbul it has been opened a UN headquarters dealing with the Grain Corridor as well. I want just to spend a few words, if I may, about the concern that there are in certain circles about the results of the elections. You know, we had the first round of elections in Turkey last Sunday. On the 28th, we are going to have the second round, and there are pretty much concerns related to the regional affairs. I do believe that the hot matters in regional international affairs in Turkey are not related to ideology and the ideological stance of the leaders. So it's not related to Erdogan, just to Erdogan or to Kılıçdaroğlu. And historically has been always a sort of continuity recording in the Turkish approach towards the region. So I think that what might change if the opponent leader, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, will win the election, which I think it's not going to happen, is just the approach. Erdogan's approach was more based on defense, and the defense apparatus was following Erdogan's decision, and then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was following both Erdogan and the defense apparatus. So it was more a security-based approach. While, as far as we know from his rhetoric, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu is opting for a more moderate and a multilateral approach, and more Western oriented. But again, there are some hot issues that, for example, when it comes to the relations between Turkey and European Union, you can be more open, but then when it comes to negotiation, you cannot do much, because the majority of negotiation chapters are blocked by some vetoes, and mainly are related to, again, Cyprus issue. So no matter who is leading the country, there are some, let's say, taboo points that it will be difficult to overcome. I leave the floor to here, to my colleague, and thank you for attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Giannotta. Very interesting your remarks about the positioning of Turkey between East and West, and in the same time regarding the role of Turkey in the stability of this region. Also, I noticed the aspect of migration, which is very important, and the large number of refugees which are in Turkey now. Well, I have the pleasure to introduce now Mr. Yücel ACER, Murat ASLAN, excuse me, which is an expert of the security and defense intelligence and propaganda practice, faculty member of Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University, and an experienced researcher of CETA Foundation. Also, Mr. Aslan wrote a lot of articles and books as Security Sector Reform for Libya, a crucial step towards state building. Mr. Aslan, you have some presentation in PowerPoint.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah. Thank you. By the way, I changed my university, so I have to tell it. Thank you for the word. You know, it's really a very complicated and a complex issue to discuss a foreign policy of any country, because a lot of dynamics at global level, regional level, country-to-country relations, etc. But Turkish foreign policy is really significant, because if you just check the globe, it's just like a stone holding different continents, and once you just take it out, well, something will change. Not only in terms of geography or borders, but also societal facts should be concerned. In this sense, when you are designing a foreign policy in a geography like this, well, there are many dynamics that you can see on the screen. And it's not that much easy to design it. I mean, there are many, but many inputs that you can't have a luxury to forget any of them. On the other hand, Turkey's position in identifying the foreign policy terms is a bit different from the other countries. Why? Well, Turkey does have inputs from many different or differing regions. Well, directly must be intertwined with each other, at least to have a sustainable foreign policy. For instance, this morning we discussed Turkish-Greek relations, East Med, maybe other stuff, doesn't matter, but it's just one theme. And we have many others, and the priorities change continuously. Today, Turkish main foreign policy priority is not Russia, but countering terrorism. Maybe tomorrow we will discuss Turkish-American relations, but on the other hand, if you go just up north of Europe, well, they have items like 1 or 2 or 3 at most. So this is just a complication and complexity for Turkish foreign policy. On the other hand, I think we have to focus on what the national interests of Turkey are. I mean, if you don't respond to such a question, you will be short of responding exactly the themes and match it with the interests. For me, I think it's really important in an academic way to describe what an interest is. Interest may be an expectation. It may be something about, having a leverage in the international arena in terms of being legitimate or justification of arguments, etc. But whatever it is, Turkey mostly focuses on the threats, preventing them or addressing them in an appropriate way. Starting from 1960s, under the cloud of bipolarity, it was terrorism again that's either encouraged by Russia or Soviet Union of then, and think that there was an economic devastation or 1974 or previous escalations in the Mediterranean Sea, or you can go and visit agency. On the other hand, it was not only limited with these items. For instance, 1973 was a major turning point, especially for the economy of Turkish foreign policy, because right after 1980s, the essential interest has become the prosperity. Why? Because Turkey was in a great depression at that time. I remember that. I'm really old, by the way. So what happened in 1980s, the Turkish foreign policy was based on building up mutual relationships with the other countries to facilitate trade and exchange. Well, terror was there, though it was marginalized. I mean, PKK terror, for instance, they organized themselves in 1978 and started attacks in 1984. Well, it was just handed over to the responsibility of the military up until 1990s, maybe end of 1990s. But governments of Turkey at that time was interested in recovering from the economic crisis witnessed in 1994, for instance. In this sense, right after 2002, AK Party government, the clear agenda of the foreign policy was to augment the prosperity quest together with terrorism. So, at the very beginning of 2000s, the foreign policy focused two different themes in the meantime. But what happened? There was some regional and global developments that Turkey could not ignore, and we had a great bargaining with the United States if they could, transfer their soldiers to Iraq or not. And it was the turning point for Turkish foreign policy, because once the parliament voted for it and rejected, well, now we had another problem on the list. It was Turkish-American escalation. If you go through I will cut it short because I don't want to tell the history of Turkish foreign policy, but Turkish interest, essential interest right now is instability, not revisionism, but preserving the status quo in the neighborhood, in the vicinity. That's why, let me tell you, once you start a sort of small revisionism, or just revise a border of two countries, forcing them, well, it happens what? It will have a domino effect, directly challenging all countries across the Middle East. Then, Turkey feels that there must be no change in status quo. And in relevance with this thinking, Turkey never supported Russian quest of dividing Ukraine, either Crimea in 2014 or now. Another issue for Turkish national interest is social cohesion inside the country because, well, it's more than 80 million. For some, it's exceeded because of the incoming immigrants or people under protection in Turkish law, because the Turkish perception or Turkish legal arrangements indicate that it's only the Europe they can send refugee to Turkey. The rest will be under protection. So if the security situation improves in their countries, they can be sent back. But social cohesion is important. If anything happens in Iraq or Syria, now the government will start questioning if it will have any impact, not only to security or economy, but also the social cohesion in Turkey. And finally, collaboration. Well, collaboration does not mean that you pledge concessions to others. You bargain, you discuss, you negotiate, and then if you agree, you can keep up with the new environment and just walk together. Otherwise, it happens something different. And in this sense, we must be aware of the new mode and mood of foreign policy. Well, it's new. Why? During the polarization terms of 1970s, 60s, or during the Cold War, it was very strict, like black and white. Now we have grays, different shades of grays. States started, cooperated, and competing in the meantime, just to realize the interests and sometimes for the sake of neoliberal agendas. Unfortunately, I have just read an article of John Sullivan of the United States, National Security Advisor. He announced that neoliberal order of the US has ended. It's then black. But Turkish perception is, well, you can cooperate and compete in the meantime. How? Or confront. You should compartmentalize the issue fields in question. If you have a problem in a certain field, well, you can compete. Like Turkish-Russian relations in Syria, up until 2020, it was only Turkey, well, triggered an arm or weapon against Russian and Iranian soldiers as NATO member at that time, and still. On the other hand, the project on building up a nuclear energy plant in Akkuyu, Mersin city, well, it continued. Because the realities on the ground requires it. On the other hand, Turkey has to observe the relations with the EU or NATO or what's happening on the Russian-China side or the competition between the US and China. And Turkey is also much dedicated to what's going on in Taiwan because it will have an impact on Turkish security concerns. For instance, who expects a Chinese immigrant flow to Europe? Nobody, right? So just please try to imagine if a war erupts between China and the United States, and then what will happen? The ones perceived in Chinese thinking as hostile in their community, they will try to leave the country. Expect millions then. So projections are limited. On the other hand, these are the realities. An accusation, as Professor Yücel and also Valeria indicated, shift of axis. No. Turkish foreign policy leans on the realities of the country, regions, and also the global developments. It's not shift of axis. It's exactly how to survive in the new environment, I believe. But I will not tell them all, but global developments are not within your initiative. They are just over there, and the big powers, well, they are dealing with it. But you are exposed to the impact of them. For the regional developments, we were discussing regional security complexes of Beribuzan, right? Today, Turkey is in between 3 regions and 3 seas that each of them does have a regional complex. Balkans, Caucasus, the Middle East. And you can add this list with Africa. Something happens in Myanmar, for instance, it's in our vision. In this sense, the internal developments are also important because it shapes the perceptions, I believe. For instance, in the Turkish literature, if you go and delve exactly the terrorism, you can find divisive, you can find, other sorts of terrorism, including radicalism. Well, it's a threat over there. On the other hand, what happened during 2010s is really important for the foreign policy psychology of Turkey, either in 2012, 13, 14, 15, and 16. I mean, coup attempt. In this sense, Turkey felt alone. And that's why Turkey designed a strategic autonomy to pursue their own interests, and by that way, aimed at augmenting the survivability. But today, we have elections. I will cut it short, sorry for that. And there's a huge discussion who will qualify in the elections or after the second turnout, and who qualifies and what happens. That's the basic question. Erdogan may present a continuity in foreign policy. That's a fact, but I don't think, because it's destined to observe global and regional developments that's not within the initiative of Turkish decision and strategy makers. On the other hand, if Kılıçdaroğlu is qualified for presidency, well, everybody expects a change, but I don't think that, because he's still not in fully charge and control of the developments surrounding Turkey. So it's complicated, and no answer for such an assessment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Aslan, for this analysis, very well pointed about the threats and the interest in the same time of Turkey, and also about the expectations regarding the foreign policy in the context or in the light of the 3 decades events. But in the end, this is real the question: continuity or change after these elections? This is the question which I would like to put to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Turkey, which is here in the hall, and I invite Mr. Ozgun Altan if he wants to say something about this. Thank you. Good to have this.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all speakers, and thank you to the moderator. Frankly, when I saw your list of subjects on the issues where we are involved, I remember the stress I had when I was entering the examination of our ministry. Just too many. And you have to memorize all of these topics, our position on all of these topics, what's going on all of these topics. Turkish terminology, English terminology is crazy. Also, I worked 8 years on NATO subjects. I remember some of my allied colleagues, they have favorite subjects. So when they hear this subject, they wake up on the meeting, because every day we have meetings forever. So they listen to very carefully what's going on this particular subject, then they can go back to a sleeping mode, let's say. Half listening, half sleeping. So as a Turkish diplomat, you have to be following every paragraph, every comma, every full stop, because everything has a meaning. We have just too many stakes. Because it's a fact that in the Google Earth, if you combine all the landmass of the Earth, it's a scientific fact, it comes to Turkiye. So this is why we're involved in everything. Frankly speaking, I don't think the election results will be resulting in much of a change on the major foreign policy issues that Turkey is involved in. Maybe slight change in the body language, in the rhetoric, maybe 5% change on some policies, but mostly these are state policies. We are the opposite of revisionist, just like you said, Murat Bey, and also you have also alluded to it. We are very conservative, actually, and we would like to conserve our country. There are also challenges, migration, terrorism coming from multiple points. So, yes, of course, our national interest, it all boils down for everybody, comes to national interest. But we do this on a very qualified way. In Ukraine, we fully support Ukraine's territorial integrity. I will not comment on some of the support that we are giving, but we are trying very hard. But also we have a qualified position. We have a line of communication with Russians, and which ended in a great benefit for the international community, the grain deal, the prisoner exchange. And we want the war to stop. We want diplomacy to win. And Ukrainians are very dear to us, but also we have an understanding with the Russians. We can talk with them. So the discussions around us on the Eastern Mediterranean, in the quote-unquote Western Balkans, which we don't agree with this terminology because it is specifically designed to exclude Turkey. What, Western Balkans? Why Western? Why not the whole of the Balkans, which includes Turkey? So Turkey's inclusion and membership to European Union, which is still a very much strategic objective for our country, it should be in the whole package. And a discussion on the Black Sea, a discussion on the 3 Seas initiative, all of these has to be in full inclusion of our country, because we are at the center of it. If, for example, let's say EU is designing a strategy on Black Sea, if not discussing with Turkey, who has 1,329 kilometers of coastline, this is inconceivable. So I think there should be more. On Black Sea also, it's a very small sea, and we don't want risks. We should be in more discussion with our Romanian colleagues, with our Bulgarian colleagues. I think the littoral NATO countries should be discussing more what can be done among the 3 countries and so forth, because we have a very bad memory from World War I. 2 German ships, they were labeled Turkish, Ottoman, and then war started. And then we found ourselves in war. In such a small land, we don't want this to happen. I know it was a long... and last but least, I think Turkish-Romanian relations, it's a win-win. I say câștigă in Romanian. It's very multifaceted. We have NATO, commerce, EU, our kinship over here, historical ties, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Many thanks for these last remarks, Mr. Ambassador. We are over the time, but I think we had, in fact, 4 presentations. That's a real win for us, but we have no time for questions. But I thank you very much for your presence here, and to my colleague for their presentations. Thank you very much, and have a good day. We'll follow the lunch, and after the panel regarding Russia's war in Ukraine. Thank you very much.